I never imagined that the love I gave so freely would one day be seen by my own daughter as an obstacle to her family's happiness. The sighs of frustration, the exchanged glances across the dinner table, they hit me harder than words ever could. And then one morning, they said it, maybe this house just isn't the right fit for someone my age. Did they really not want me living there anymore? A deep wave of sadness and rejection flooded my heart, but I held it in. I packed my bags and left that house with quiet dignity. I will show them how beautifully I can rebuild my life, even if I have to start from the very slowness they always criticize me for. I was 68 years old when I moved into my daughter's home because she said she wanted me to have a place to call my own, a home where I could finally rest after all the years I had spent raising her with everything I had. She wanted to give back the love I had poured into her. And so, I arrived at her doorstep with nothing but 3 modest suitcases and a heart full of hope. If this story resonates with your heart, click subscribe and comment number 1. Then, we will start this story. But instead of warmth, instead of the love I had been quietly building toward every day, I was met with silent disappointment. Little by little, day after day, that hope began to wither. Rachel greeted me at the door with a cold, faint smile, one that seemed rehearsed. "Hi, Mom. You're here," she said, as if announcing the weather. Her house was beautiful, gleaming floors, bright windows, not a speck of dust. It smelled faintly of lemon polish and lavender, like a space waiting to be photographed for a catalog, but it didn't feel like a home. They gave me a room on the first floor. "It'll be easier for you, Mom," Rachel said, though what she really meant was, "It'll be easier for us." It was a small space with a single bed, a narrow wardrobe, and a writing desk pushed into the corner. On the bed was a floral quilt I had sewn years ago. I recognized every stitch. It had once belonged in the guest room of my old home, and Rachel must have packed it away after the house was sold. That detail, thoughtful or calculated, I couldn't say, nearly brought me to tears. Daniel, my son-in-law, appeared at the doorway carrying one of my suitcases. "Let me get that," he said, polite but not warm. His tone reminded me of the way a hotel concierge offers help, courteous, but never close. That evening, we had dinner together, pasta with roasted vegetables. Rachel asked the children about school. Daniel scrolled through his phone beneath the table. No one asked me about my trip. No one asked how my day was. I sat quietly, offering to pass the bread twice before realizing no one had heard me. Afterward, I helped clean up. Rachel thanked me distractedly, then disappeared upstairs to help with homework. Daniel retreated to his home office. I found myself alone in the kitchen, drying dishes in a house that wasn't mine, surrounded by people who no longer felt like mine either. Later, I sat on the front porch with a cup of tea. The rocking chair creaked beneath me. The air was cool, and a few leaves danced across the lawn. From inside, I could hear soft laughter, the hum of a television, the gentle rhythm of the dishwasher. They were happy. They were together. And I wasn't part of that world anymore. I used to be at the center of a home. I used to be the one who kept things running, kept people fed, kissed scraped knees, and reminded everyone where the library books were due. Now, I was someone they stepped around. In the days that followed, I tried to stay useful. I cooked dinner twice. Nothing fancy, just old family favorites. Rachel praised it, but not enough to ask me to cook again. I swept the porch, folded towels, organized the pantry. Then one afternoon, I found that same pantry had been rearranged, my labels removed, my system replaced. Rachel shrugged when I asked. "Oh, it just made more sense this way," she said. Daniel never said much, but he didn't need to. The subtle sigh when I took too long putting on my shoes, the way he avoided eye contact when we crossed paths in the hallway, the way he only addressed me when necessary, like a well-meaning nurse to a nursing home patient. I noticed the children stopped asking me to read to them. They stopped showing me their school drawings. Lucas once walked right past me without so much as a hello. I waved anyway. At first, I told myself it would take time. Families need time to adjust. But then I realized I was the only one adjusting. Everyone else had simply absorbed me into the schedule, like another chore to manage. One evening, as I sipped tea alone on the porch again, Rachel joined me with a glass of wine. "How are you settling in?" she asked. I looked at her, really looked, at her perfectly pressed shirt, her expensive watch, her forced ease. "I'm fine," I said. "Good, we're glad you're here." I nodded, pretending it was enough, pretending I didn't see how she said "we," as if she were still trying to convince herself. After a few more minutes, she excused herself. "Emails," she said. I sat there long after she was gone. The air was still. The porch light flickered above me. A neighbor's sprinkler hissed in the distance. I wrapped the quilt tighter around my shoulders, and somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "You're not wanted here. You're only being endured." And for the first time in my life, I didn't argue with that voice, because I knew it was telling the truth. I told myself families adjust, but what if I was the only one adjusting? I woke before the sun again, just as I always did. Old habits, like creaking joints and early coffee, die hard. I moved slowly across the darkened house, careful not to disturb anyone, not even the golden retriever next door, whose bark greeted every passing car. I brewed a small pot of coffee in their sleek chrome machine, something that looked like it belonged in a spaceship, and poured it into the floral ceramic mug I'd brought from my old house. It was chipped at the rim, but it fit perfectly in my hand. The kitchen, pristine and untouched, made my every move feel too loud. The marble countertops gleamed, and the bar stools sat in a row like disciplined soldiers. I wiped down the counter out of instinct. Then I folded the throw blanket on the couch, fed the cat, straightened the stack of magazines on the coffee table. Tiny gestures, a kind of offering. Rachel came downstairs a little after 7, fully dressed and phone in hand. She glanced at the coffee pot and gave me a tight smile. "Thanks for making this, Mom." "No trouble," I said. I never said no to coffee or to love, even the brittle kind. She sat at the kitchen island, scrolling and sipping. I waited for a moment, then asked gently, "Anything I can help with today?" She looked up, startled. "Oh no, we've got the kids' dentist appointments and dance practice this afternoon. It's going to be chaotic." "I could drive," I offered. She hesitated. "Just enough." "That's kind of you, but it's okay. You've done so much already." Had I? That afternoon, I decided to make one of George's favorites, rosemary roast chicken with root vegetables, something to bring the family together. I took my time preparing it, peeled carrots, sliced potatoes, chopped fresh herbs I'd bought from the farmer's market down the road. The oven warmed the house with a scent I hadn't felt since home. When Rachel came in with the kids, she sniffed the air. "Smells nice." Daniel arrived moments later, still in his work shirt, sleeves rolled up, phone in hand. He sat down at the dining table, not bothering to take off his shoes. I plated everything carefully, even added fresh parsley as garnish. Hannah came in, asked what it was. "Chicken, sweetie," I said, "like we used to make on Sundays." Daniel cut into his piece, chewed once, twice, then pushed it around. "It's a little dry," he muttered, not looking up. "Maybe next time we could just order from Basil Thai." I blinked. Rachel said nothing. She offered him the soy sauce. The kids asked for mac and cheese. I nodded, swallowed hard, and reached for my glass of water. I ate in silence. After dinner, Rachel took a phone call. Daniel returned to his office. The children disappeared upstairs. No one asked about my day. No one mentioned the dinner. I found myself scraping dishes alone. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the quilt again, the same one that had made me smile when I first arrived. Now it lay flat and impersonal, like a hotel comforter. In the following days, I noticed things. Rachel reorganized the pantry I had carefully labeled. Daniel sighed audibly when I took too long lacing up my orthopedic sneakers at the front door. They stopped asking me to join them for walks. I declined the next 2 invitations before they stopped offering. One morning, Rachel appeared with a brand new iPad in a mint green case. "Here," she said with a smile, "so you can read or watch something fun. Keep yourself entertained." It sounded sweet. It wasn't. I thanked her. I meant it. Then I set it on my dresser and never turned it on. Later that week, I passed by the front window and saw Daniel talking to the neighbor. Greg, I think his name was. Daniel laughed, hands in his pockets, and I heard him say, "It's a bit of an adjustment having Margaret around. But we're managing." I stood quietly in the hallway, holding a basket of folded towels that suddenly felt like bricks. The small humiliations began to gather, like dust in a quiet corner. Lucas, my grandson, used to ask me to read to him, but now, when I'd begin a story, he'd squirm and say, "It's okay, I'll just watch YouTube." Hannah, who once clung to me like Velcro, now breezed past me on her way to piano lessons without a glance. Children don't need instructions on how to exclude. They learn by osmosis. I offered to babysit. "We've already booked a sitter," Rachel would say with a grateful tone that sounded more like relief. I tried to help with laundry. "It's easier if I just throw everything in together," she'd reply. Even the cat stopped sleeping in my room. I began to retreat more, curling into my space like a cat in a basket. I filled my days with crossword puzzles and rereading old novels. I walked the neighborhood just to feel the breeze, to remind myself that I was still part of the world, even if no one in that house saw me anymore. One evening, I baked cookies with Hannah and Lucas while Rachel ran errands. We laughed. We played a game of Guess the Spice. I forgot for a moment that I was on the fringe of their lives. When Rachel came home, the children swarmed her, shoving cookies into her hands, telling her about our afternoon, and she smiled, hugged them. "That's great, sweethearts." Then she glanced at me. "Thanks, Mom." Just that, a glance. No embrace. No, "You're amazing for doing this." Just a sentence tossed over her shoulder like yesterday's mail. I told myself it was enough. That night, I did laundry in the quiet downstairs room. Warm socks, soft towels. I found peace in the steady rhythm of folding. That's when I heard them, upstairs, in the kitchen. "She's slowing everything down," Daniel said, his voice edged with frustration. "You saw how long it took her to get the kids ready. It's like she's stuck in slow motion." "She means well," Rachel replied, "but it's getting harder, Trevor. I feel like we have another child to take care of." I stood frozen. A towel slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a muffled thud. Another child. That was what I had become. Not a woman who had once stood tall in a classroom, managing 30 kindergartners with compassion and steel. Not a mother who had worked night shifts to buy Christmas presents, who had spent hours sewing Halloween costumes by hand. Just another child. I walked up the stairs, slowly, every step heavier than the last. My feet carried not just my body, but the invisible weight of all the things I hadn't said. I entered my room, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. The quilt didn't feel warm anymore. I stared at my hands, hands that had soothed babies, baked birthday cakes, clapped proudly at school plays, and they trembled. But not with sadness, with clarity. I would not stay in a place where I had become a burden. I would not become a shadow moving silently through someone else's life. The words I'd heard tonight, they had broken something open, but not in me, in the illusion. And just like that, I knew. I smiled and nodded, pretending not to hear, just like I'd pretended not to feel. "You're just slowing us down, that's all," Rachel said, smiling as if it were kindness. The morning air had a certain stillness to it, the kind that makes you feel like something's about to happen, even when nothing's moving yet. I woke early again, as the rest of the house slept. The blinds in my room glowed faintly gray, the sky still undecided between night and day. I moved slowly, easing my feet into my soft indoor shoes, stretching the stiffness from my knees. I pulled on a pair of slacks and a pale blue cardigan with little pearl buttons. It used to be one of George's favorites on me. The house creaked politely beneath me as I walked down the hall. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed steadily. The clock above the pantry door ticked its eternal rhythm. I made coffee. Not for me alone. I made 2 cups, one with sugar, one without. I still believed, somehow, that the ritual might pull us back towards something familiar. The mug sat neatly on the counter. I waited. Upstairs, muffled voices, footsteps. Then Rachel appeared, hair tight, lips tighter. She didn't say good morning. She went straight for the cereal, pouring it into bowls with machine-like precision. Daniel followed a minute later, his shirt untucked, still rubbing sleep from his face. He grunted toward me and reached for the orange juice. I stood there holding the coffee like a peace offering, but they didn't notice. We sat at the table, the 3 of us, in brittle silence. The children had already been dropped at school. Rachel glanced at Daniel, then back at me. "Mom," she said, her voice unusually soft. "Can we talk for a minute?" I set the mug down gently. "Of course." She perched on the edge of her chair, elbows on her knees. Daniel leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "We've been thinking," she began. "It's just, things have been feeling a little crowded lately." "Crowded?" I echoed, looking around. There was enough space in this house to host a church choir. She rushed to clarify. "Not physically, just schedules, energy, the rhythm of the house." Daniel jumped in, his tone measured like he was delivering a quarterly report. "We think it might be better, for everyone, if you had a space that matched your pace." I stared at him. "My pace?" He nodded, as if the matter had already been settled somewhere I wasn't invited. Rachel offered a smile, like a Band-Aid over a stab wound. "There are some wonderful independent senior communities nearby. Amenities, privacy, people your age." People my age. She might as well have said, people who don't get in the way. I felt my chest rise slowly. "I see," I said. She looked relieved. "We'll help you look. We want this to be smooth." Daniel said something about brochures and tours, but I didn't hear the rest. My ears had filled with the hum of the refrigerator. I looked at the countertop, gleaming and untouched, at the wide window where sunlight now streamed in like judgment. I thought of George. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed up sewing costumes, of all the mornings I'd packed lunches, driven to school, cheered in auditoriums. I thought of Christmases built from coupons and resilience, of Rachel as a baby, colicky and red-faced, and how I'd walked the hallway with her from midnight to sunrise. And now I was slowing them down, just in the way. I nodded, quietly. "I understand." Their smiles widened. They mistook my calm for agreement. After they left for work, I sat at the kitchen table. My coffee had gone cold. I stared out the window for a long time. The swing set stood motionless in the backyard. The leaves had begun to turn. Gold and orange and crimson clung to the trees like reluctant truths. I carried the coffee to the sink, poured it out, rinsed the cup, dried it with a linen cloth, every motion precise, purposeful. I moved through the house like a ghost, but one with unfinished business. I returned to my room and opened the closet. I took out my 2 leather suitcases, still strong, still ready. I began to pack. Only the essentials, only what mattered. My old teaching journal, a framed photo of George and me on the coast of Maine, a crocheted scarf Hannah had once made in 2nd grade, long forgotten in a drawer, each item folded carefully, a ritual of release. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel rage. What I felt was done. Done hoping, done shrinking, done pretending that being polite meant being loved. Later that evening, they returned. The house filled again with voices, footsteps, door slams, microwave beeps. I stayed in my room, quiet, listening. Rachel knocked once but didn't wait for an answer. "Mom," she called, "dinner's ready if you're hungry." I stayed on my bed, my hands resting on my suitcase. "No, thank you," I said gently. Silence, and then the sound of her walking away. I sat for a long time. The clock ticked. The cat patted in, blinked at me, and curled into a ball on the floor. I looked around the room, the desk, the dresser, the little corner lamp I had turned on every night, a space that had been carved out for me, but not offered with an open heart. That night, I did not sleep. I planned. At dawn, I rose. I dressed with quiet deliberation, a white blouse, slacks, a navy cardigan. I pinned my hair back. I slipped on my wedding band and stared at myself in the mirror, not broken, not burdened, ready. They thought I was slow. They thought I was small. They were about to find out. If they thought I was slow, they were about to see just how fast I could move when it truly mattered. They wanted me gone, so I made it easy for them by clearing out everything they thought they owned. The sky was still dark when I opened my eyes. No birdsong yet, no sound of car engines or barking dogs, just stillness, clean, sacred stillness. I sat up, swung my legs over the side of the bed, and felt the floor meet my feet like an old friend. I moved with purpose, every muscle and joint remembering its role. I didn't wince this morning. I didn't stall. I was steady. In the dim light of my bedroom, I buttoned a soft navy blouse, slipped on dark slacks, and laced up my walking shoes. Practical shoes. I brushed my hair back and tied it low. No makeup, no perfume, only clarity. They had left early, an out-of-town meeting for Rachel, and Daniel had taken the kids to school. Their absence wasn't strange. What was strange was the feeling in the house, a quiet that didn't feel like loneliness this time. It felt like space being returned. The day before, I had called the moving service. A polite young man named Colton answered. I told him I needed help moving household belongings into storage. He asked no questions, just gave me a time, a quote, and a yes ma'am. I liked him already. I made 1 cup of coffee. I didn't need to anymore. I sipped it slowly at the kitchen table, sunlight beginning to peek through the curtains, casting long gold shadows on the walls. Then I stood, rinsed the mug, and began. The master bedroom first. I moved through it like a librarian sorting books. Daniel's suits, Rachel's dresses, her handbags lined like museum pieces along the closet shelves. I folded everything carefully, no vengeance, just order. I laid them in neat piles on the bed, ready for boxes. Next came the hallway closet, photo albums, old trophies, unused board games. I packed each item with care, not because I owed them anything, but because I owed myself the grace to do it right. I left their wedding photo on the nightstand, face down. The kitchen was last. I emptied drawers of their artisanal knives, their rarely used bread maker, the endless gadgets from bridal registries and holiday sales. I wrapped glassware in newspaper I found in the garage, cushioned each item like I was packing someone else's future. By 10 a.m., the front lawn had begun to fill. Boxes, luggage, labeled bins. A couple of garment bags hung neatly over the porch railing. I arranged everything as if for display. It wasn't chaos, it was choreography. Neighbors slowed their cars, curiosity crawling across their faces. I didn't wave. I didn't need to. At exactly 10:30, the moving truck pulled up, a large white vehicle with red block letters and 2 young men in navy polos. One of them, Colton I assumed, smiled as he stepped out. Mrs. Whitmore? That's me. He looked around. We've got ourselves a project, huh? I smiled. Just a bit of early fall cleaning. They worked quickly, efficient, no idle chatter, no judgments. I handed them cold bottles of water I'd kept in the fridge. They were grateful, surprised. I always believed in the power of small kindnesses. The boxes vanished into the truck one by one. The lawn cleared. The porch returned to stillness. I watched it all, arms crossed, steady. The way I used to watch a classroom settle into focus after recess. When they finished, I followed them in my car, my old but well-kept Lexus SUV, to the storage facility a few miles away. I'd chosen one with security cameras, climate control, and clean concrete floors. No dust, no mold, just space. We filled the unit in under 30 minutes. Labeled, stacked, aligned. I paid in cash, 6 months prepaid. As Colton handed me the receipt, he paused. You moving soon? I met his gaze. Already did. He nodded like he understood more than I said. I returned to the house just before 1. The sun was high now, the air warm. I stepped through the door and found myself surrounded by nothing. No sofa, no rug, no photos, no evidence of living. Only walls and floors and the soft hum of a refrigerator that no longer cooled anything for anyone. I moved room by room once more, wiping surfaces, picking up stray socks, smoothing out corners. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. When I reached the kitchen, I took out a small envelope. Inside was a key, silver, worn smooth at the edges, and a short handwritten note on cream stationery. Your belongings are in Storage Unit 214 at Oak Ridge Secure Storage. Paid through March. No explanation needed. Take care. I placed the envelope neatly under the ceramic rooster Rachel had insisted on keeping from my old house. It seemed fitting. Then I returned to my room, where only my 2 suitcases remained zipped and ready. I sat on the bed, the same quilt beneath me, and took one long, quiet breath. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't spite. It was closure. I wheeled the suitcases out, one in each hand, opened the front door, and walked out without looking back. Not because I didn't care, but because I had already said goodbye to the silence, to the shrinking, to the smallness they tried to wrap me in. They wanted me gone. I simply left first. Their screams echoed through the empty house, but I wasn't there to hear them. I spent that afternoon in a quiet little cafe a few blocks from the storage unit. It was one of those places tucked between a dry cleaner and a florist, with faded wallpaper and mismatched chairs that somehow felt like they belonged together. The waitress called me Han and poured coffee without being asked. I tipped her well. Outside, the sun hung low, painting the sidewalk in amber streaks. I sat by the window, my suitcase beside me, sipping my drink slowly. The world moved on. Traffic lights blinked. Teenagers laughed on skateboards. A woman in scrubs picked up her takeout order. For the first time in months, I wasn't watching for someone to need me. I wasn't waiting for permission to speak. I simply was. When I finished my coffee, I returned to the Lexus and drove to the apartment I'd signed the lease on 2 weeks earlier. A modest one-bedroom on the 4th floor of a brick building that faced a small park. Nothing extravagant, but it was mine. The landlord had left the keys under the doormat. The air inside was cool and clean, the kind that still carries the scent of fresh paint and promise. Light streamed through the balcony doors, pooling across the hardwood floor. There was no furniture yet, just 2 suitcases and a folding chair I'd brought in my trunk, but the emptiness wasn't cold. It was space, pure, unclaimed, welcoming. I unpacked slowly, a framed photo of George and me on a windy beach, a stack of books I couldn't part with, a handmade scarf, a small ceramic bowl Rachel had made me in the 3rd grade that I still used to hold tea bags. That night, I sat on the balcony with a blanket over my knees and a cup of peppermint tea. The air was crisp, scented with chimney smoke and distant barbecue. I watched families in the park pack up picnic baskets, children trailing behind with sticky fingers and full hearts. No one looked at me as if I were in the way. No one looked at me at all, and somehow that felt freeing. Meanwhile, across town, Rachel and Daniel pulled into their driveway at exactly 6:17 p.m. I know this not because I was watching, but because I could imagine their routines as clearly as I once imagined my own lesson plans. Rachel would carry her laptop bag in her left hand and press the garage door button with her right. Daniel would step out first, stretch his back, and check his phone even before unlocking the front door. Only this time, something would be different. No curtains in the windows, no porch lights glowing warmly, no sound from the television inside, just silence. They would open the door, step inside, and feel it. The absence. No furniture, no photos, no coats on the hook, no wine glasses on the counter, only walls and echoes. Rachel would call my name. Once. Then again. Daniel would check the garage. The children would ask, "Where's Grandma?" Rachel would rush to the kitchen. She'd find the ceramic rooster, and under it, the envelope. I pictured her face as she read the note, how her fingers might tremble, how her voice would catch. Daniel would snatch the letter from her hands, reread it. "Is this legal?" he'd mutter. "She took everything?" No, not everything. Only what they never truly saw. I wasn't there to witness their reaction. I didn't need to be. I had lived in that house long enough to know the emotional choreography. Disbelief, confusion, defensiveness, blame, but maybe, if even for a moment, regret. Let them have that. Let them wrestle with what they had ignored. Back in my apartment, I let the silence stretch. It was a good silence, a healed silence, the kind that waits for nothing and holds no weight. The next day, I found a cozy second-hand furniture store run by a woman named Elise who wore large glasses and floral scarves and treated every armchair like a dear old friend. I bought a small table, 2 mismatched chairs, and a bookshelf that leaned ever so slightly but reminded me of home. "Elise, I said, do you know of any book clubs in the area?" She beamed. "Do I ever?" She handed me a flyer for a women's reading circle that met twice a month at the public library. "And," she added with a wink, "they're always looking for someone who loves stories more than small talk." I laughed, a real laugh, the kind that feels like sunlight breaking through morning fog. Later that week, I walked into the library with a tote bag and a fresh notebook. The women welcomed me like an old friend who'd just returned from a long trip. They asked about my favorite authors, laughed at my sarcastic comments, and offered me cinnamon cookies someone's granddaughter had made. I sat in that circle, surrounded by the warm hum of conversation and paperback pages, and felt something settle in me, belonging. Not because of blood ties, but because I showed up. Whole, unapologetic. After the meeting, as I walked home past the flower shop and the cafe that now felt familiar, someone called my name. "Margaret?" I turned. A woman with a walker, her silver hair in a bun, eyes kind and bright behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. June Carter," I said, surprised. We had met briefly weeks ago, back when she had stumbled outside her apartment and I'd helped her call an ambulance. I hadn't thought she remembered me. "You live here now?" she asked. "I do," she smiled. "Good. The building just got warmer." She invited me to her apartment for tea. I accepted. We talked for an hour, 2, about life, about loss, about starting over. "You know," she said as I was leaving, "sometimes the best parts of our lives come after we think the story's already ended." I nodded, heart full. That night, I sat on my balcony again, with the same old blanket and a new kind of warmth in my chest. Below, the park lights flickered on. Somewhere someone played jazz on a speaker too loud. Laughter drifted up from a group of teenagers walking home, and I, Margaret Whitmore, was no longer an afterthought in someone else's life.